Okay, so we're learning as we titled it, the halachic building blocks of Sefiras HAOMER. So I'm saying the halachic building blocks because we're not learning halacha in the sense that it's not going to be, let me rephrase that. We're not learning practical halacha in the sense that it'll be do, don't, do, don't. And oftentimes it's hard to remember the do, don'ts because there's so many and so detailed. What I'm going to share is some of the underpinnings that cause the do-don'ts in their various different scenarios. And I think when you understand that, a lot of the halachas and details you'll hear will click much better because you'll understand what's underneath them. Now, the laws of Sefiras HAOMER in a lot of ways, certainly the complex scenarios of, if I forgot, I remembered, I said it during Shkia, I said it too early, I said it too late. A lot of these scenarios, with a bracha, without a bracha, it comes down to the doubt, suffix. Lots of Sefiras HAOMER is around suffix, doubt. There's lots and lots of doubt around Sefiras HAOMER. And when you're in doubt, what happens is there's a lot of pluses and minuses in doubt, just generally speaking. Just put one principle down, which is suffix brachas lahakol. If a person's in doubt of some scenario, then when it comes to the blessing, he's lenient. So if I'm not sure if I did, let's say, a certain mitzvah, so I do the mitzvah again, but I won't make a blessing on the mitzvah because I'm stringent on the mitzvah itself to do it over, but I'm lenient on the bracha. I don't do it over. Right?
Since most brachas are rabbanan, so we treat.
Well, all brachas are rabbanan except for benching. Except for benching. But brachas as a rule are rabbinic. So that's going to be a big subject of here, understanding what are the doubts that go into Sefiras HAOMER. Why do they exist? How do they exist? And then that shapes a lot of the discussion around the various different scenarios and how you treat halacha. So let's begin from the very beginning of Sefiras HAOMER, which of course is the verse, scripture. Not going to go through every single pasuk in detail, just I'm going to read through it quickly in English, follow along, and this is just to get an overview of what the mitzvah is. So this is in the book of Vayikra, right? The book of Leviticus, chapter 23, as you see there, it says Chav Gimel, Tes dash Chav Beis, meaning it's the verse, the first line there is verse Tes, pasuk Tes, the last is Chav Beis 22. So, and the Lord spoke to Moses saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come to the land which I am giving you, right? They're in the desert, and God says when you get to Israel, and when you're there, you reap its harvest, you shall bring to the Kohen an omer of the beginning of your reaping. That's the word omer. The word omer is actually a measure. And Hashem is saying, when you reap your harvest, right at the beginning, first thing you do is take an omer measure and bring it to the Kohen. That's the word omer.
There's one thing here. Most of the time when he spoke to the people of Israel, he said, and God said this, and God said that, and God told us to do this.
And the Lord spoke to Moses saying, Lord, God.
But now he says, and I'm giving you.
Sorry?
Come to the land which I am giving you.
Right, because now he's quoting God. God saying, I. And the Lord spoke to Moses saying, right? This is what you should tell them in my name. Right, so this is God, God saying to Moses, tell them what I'm saying to you now, right? So when you get to the land that I give you, you get the harvest, bring an omer, this measure, to the Kohen, and then the Kohen shall wave, verse 3, the next verse, shall wave the omer before the Lord in the temple, basically, so that it will be acceptable for you. The Kohen shall wave it on the day after, on the day after the rest day, referring to the day after the first day of Pesach. The first day of Pesach is the rest day referred to here. We're not getting into that discussion now. Famous discussion between the Sadducees and the Chachamim, the sages. That's not our discussion tonight. So the day after the rest day, the day after Pesach, which is the second day of Pesach, that's when you're going to bring this waving offering. And on that day, when the waving, you should bring an unblemished lamb. The next verse describes the rest of the offering that goes along with this waving of the omer. page 2, the next verse. Okay, so now that you brought the waving offering, you brought the HAOMER, you waved it, you brought along with it the offering, as described right here. Now the verse says, and you shall count for yourself from the morrow, from the day after of the rest day, from the day you bring the HAOMER as a wave offering, 7 weeks, they shall be complete. So the next day, after the rest day being the first day of Pesach, the next day when you're doing the wave offering, start counting. What should you count? What does it say here? What should you count? What does it say to count?
From the second day of Pesach.
But what do you count?
Oh,
7 weeks,
count until.
right? And you shall count for yourself from the morrow of the rest day, from the day you bring the HAOMER as a wave offering, 7 weeks, they shall be complete. So just as to count 7 weeks. And then it says, on that 7th week, now you shall count until the day after the 7th week, namely the 50th day, because 7 weeks is, of course, 49 days. That 50th day, you shall bring a new meal offering to the Lord on the holiday known as, which holiday is that?
Shavuot. Weeks.
Thank you, Dennis. Shavuos. That's why Shavuos is called Shavuos. The word Shavuos means weeks. This is the verse. Okay. And then the verse goes on to describe the offering of Shavuos, and that it's a rest day. Yeah, that's the rest of the pages. You can go now to page 3. It would be clear on what's happening.
I just don't see the pasuk that says you shall count the days, or the suggestion of counting days.
It doesn't say. That's what I said. It says count weeks.
Count. Where does it say? You should count for yourselves.
Yeah.
It doesn't say what, but where it starts from.
No, it does say. It says you should count. Look. And you shall count for yourself from the morrow of the rest day, from the day you bring the offer as a wave offering, 7 weeks. Count 7 weeks.
That's where it's. Okay.
But it didn't. You're right. It did not say to count days. You're right. It did not say to count days.
The morrow of the rest day, from the day you bring the HAOMER as a wave offering.
That's part of the description of the morrow. That's the part of the description of that day.
From the second day on.
That's right. Which is the day that you're bringing that HAOMER offering. You shall count 7 weeks. See?
You have to push it in. You should count 7 weeks.
That's how it is. Put a comma from the morrow of the rest day, comma, from the day you bring the HAOMER as a wave offering, comma, 7 weeks. Read it like that.
Yeah.
Okay? But you're right. It doesn't say to count days. It says to count 7 weeks. Only in the next verse, when it says the day after the 7 weeks are over, right? Next verse says, after the 7th week, then bring another offering. Then it says 50th day. So there's the first time it gives an indication of the relevance of a day. Because till now it just said weeks. Okay, now let's go to page 3, Devarim. I apologize for my voice. So here too, again, you shall count 7 weeks.
Sorry, which page are we on?
3.
Okay.
Devarim. You can read the other text there. It's just a description of the karbanos. It's first a description of the karban on Pesach, count, and then the karban on Shavuos. Right? Now, in Devarim, which of course the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, is Moshe Rabbeinu repeating Torah. So now the mitzvah comes up again. So here Moshe Rabbeinu says, actually over here, it's a little bit disconnected from the offerings, but it doesn't matter. But the pasuk repeats the commandment again. You shall count. What are you counting? What does it say? No?
You should count 7 weeks for
Or
yourself.
7 weeks for yourself.
For yourself. For yourself is an interesting word. Why for yourself? Just count. Why for yourself? So the sages explain that you shouldn't think that you treat it like Yovel. We also count for 50th year, but not every individual Jew has to do that counting. The Beth Din does it on behalf of everybody. Here, Torah says for yourself. That we all have to do that, each of us individually. But again, it says 7 weeks.
We don't have to do it individually, you said?
No, we do have to do it individually. That's why the verse says for
Okay.
yourself. Yeah.
Okay. Does this include women as well too, as this is a time-bound mitzvah?
No, it's not a. It's a time-bound mitzvah, and for women, not obligated. Although they may and are encouraged to do so.
Okay.
Okay. You shall count 7 weeks for yourself from the time the sickle is first put to the standing crop. That's on the second day, right there in the second day of Pesach. And you should begin to count 7 weeks. And then it says you can make the festival of the weeks, which is Shavuos. Okay. So the only indication for day counting is at the total number at the end, 50th day. That's going to be a relevant component. Yeah. So let's see now the Gemara and Menachos. Bottom of page 3. We'll learn the Gemara and Menachos, then we'll go to Ma'ariv, and then we'll come back. So the Gemara analyzes the matter itself of Abaye's statement cited in the course of the previous discussion. Abaye said, it is a mitzvah to count days, and it's also a mitzvah to count weeks. Well, weeks, we know it's supposed to count weeks. The verse says straight up count weeks. Days, this is the chidush, this is the novelty of Abaye's din, that you have to count the days too. And this is taken from the fact that the Torah gives a conclusion number. We already know how long 7 weeks is. We can do the math. And the Torah says in the day after the seventh day, you should have a holiday called Shavuos and bring another offering. The Torah doesn't have to say it's the 50th day. We know math. We can do that. Torah says it's 50th day. You have to count days too.
But since we don't count the 50th day, why would I think we have to count the preceding 49?
So that you get to 50th day. It becomes the 50th day because you counted 49. By Torah telling you
7 weeks.
By Torah telling you that the day after the seventh weeks is 50th day, it's because Torah is telling you already counting for the last 49. That's why it's 50th now. Because you were counting the last 49, indicating that you're counting days. Otherwise, Torah doesn't have to say it at all. Just say the day after the 7 weeks, bring a new offering.
It went out of its way to say
50th, because if to count the days, to tell you, because you made your count to 50. Okay, so Abaye says you're counting both days and weeks. The Gemara, notes that in fact the sage of the study hall of Rav Ashi counted days and they also counted weeks. Amemar counted days, but not weeks. Now, Amemar almost seems to be out of character. If he did only weeks and not days, okay? Why days and not weeks? So explains the Gemara and the explanation of his practice. Amemar said, since there's no longer an Omer offering, the counting is performed only in commemoration of the temple. Therefore, one does not need to be so scrupulous to count both days and weeks. The whole thing is rabbinic anyway. It's just to remember what it used to be. Because it's only to remember what it used to be, so I only do one of the two, just to remember. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. I'm giving you the background. You already have the end goal. I'm giving you the reverse engineering. Let's look at Rashi and then we'll go to Ma'ariv. So Rashi says,
What time tomorrow?
Now we're going to do Rashi and we're going to Ma'ariv. So it's 2 lines. Amemar counted days and not weeks. So explains Rashi. Amar, the counting we do today, it's not an obligation. There is no Omer. We learned in the pasuk the whole counting is to count between the first Omer offering, the waving of the Omer, and then the second Omer offering on Shavuos. There's no Omer, so why count? So it's only to remember what happened in temple times. Enough to do just the days. So what do we have here? The machlokes in the Gemara is what? According to Rav Ashi, which says you have to count both days and weeks. Rav Ashi saying, but it's a biblical commandment. And therefore, you got to, Rav Ashi and HAOMER are both after the temple is destroyed. So when Rav Ashi says you have to count days and weeks, that's a biblical commandment. Whereas when HAOMER says, oh, I only counted the days. Why? Because it's only a rabbinic anyway. Or maybe in his opinion, it's even less than rabbinic. It's just to remember. Okay, so this is already one doubt here. Is it biblical or is it rabbinic? Or is it maybe just a remembrance? So we've already taken it down a notch, so to speak, that doesn't have the same weight as a regular mitzvah. And therefore, when it comes to doubt of rabbanon or rabbinical mitzvahs, we're also more lenient in a case of doubt. Because it's a rabbinic mitzvah, so we're more lenient. Okay, so we're going to pause here, and then we're going to continue after Ma'ariv.
Very good.
So, we learned the Gemara, which tells a dispute of Rav Ashi and HAOMER. It was HAOMER. Yeah. Rav Ashi, who said that we have to count both days and weeks, indicating that the mitzvah remains biblical. And then we have HAOMER, who said, well, I only count the days because the whole thing is rabbinic anyway. Now, whether we're going to go with the biblical or the rabbinic, we're still going to be counting both days and weeks. Because the quote the way the Alter frames it is called a tikkun chacham ke'ein daraisa tikkun. This is the Alter was quoting from earlier sources, but the point is that when the sages enacted something, they enacted that it should be, especially if they're building something to do a mitzvah, to remember the way they did it in the temple. Then the mitzvah will be the way it was in the temple, not in some other fashion. So even if it's rabbinic, we're still going to be doing both the days and the weeks. But nonetheless, it would seem that this dispute between Rav Ashi and HAOMER is whether it's biblical or rabbinic. And this is seen, at least it would seem that this is the case based on Rambam, which is the next set of texts on page 4 there. So in English. The Rambam's laws of counting the HAOMER is everything you're about to read right now. It's tiny. Then when you read it in the Shulchan Aruch, especially in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, it's much, much longer. Okay, Rambam writes, it is a positive commandment to count 7 complete weeks from the day the HAOMER is brought, as states, from the day after the Sabbath meaning the day of rest, which is the first day of Pesach, you shall count 7 weeks. It is a mitzvah to count the days together with the weeks, as states, you shall count 50 days. Right, that was what we talked about earlier. The verse says 50 days, indicating also to count the days. And let's remember, the Rambam Book of Laws, unlike the Code of Jewish Law, which is written specifically for those who are living in an era of destruction of the temple, us today, Rambam's Book of Laws implies that the temple is standing. Rambam doesn't speak exclusively to us nowadays. He speaks to all Jews forever, when the temple is standing, when Mashiach comes, and so on. So Rambam says it's a mitzvah to count the HAOMER from the day after the offering is brought. He's talking about the way you're supposed to do it when the temple is standing and you wave the HAOMER offering and then you start counting. And then he goes on to say, one who forgot and did not count at night, he should count in the day. One should count only when standing. If one counted while sitting, he fulfilled his obligation. About what? The day versus night?
If you have to stand, if it's only when you're standing, why is it counted when you're sitting? Why do they?
Why? I don't remember. I don't know. There's many cases like that where the mitzvah is optimally done in a certain way. If you did it a different way,
Preferable to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, then it says, this mitzvah, says the Rambam, is incumbent on every Jewish male in every place and at all times. What's he saying? Even when the temple is destroyed, this mitzvah is still obligated. Which mitzvah? The mitzvah you just described, which is a biblical commandment. So clearly Rambam learns that it's a biblical commandment to count the HAOMER nowadays. As he just described, weeks and days, whether the HAOMER is being brought or not being brought. So which means he's understanding Rav Ashi, who said, I count weeks and days, to mean it's a biblical commandment. HAOMER said it's rabbinic. But me, Rambam, I follow Rav Ashi, who said it's biblical. Rambam's view. Okay, the next halacha describes the blessing, and then that's pretty much the end of the laws of HAOMER. Now let's look at top page 5. We have Tosfos. Tosfos, the famous commentator on the Gemara, writes like this. He quotes the Gemara. The Gemara's, excuse me, the Tosfos we're about to read here is a very long Tosfos. It's a very long commentary. We're not reading the whole thing. We're only reading 2 lines here. But as the class will go on, we're going to be reading more passages from that same commentary Tosfos. So Tosfos writes, he quotes HAOMER, which says, Zeichel HaMikdash, to remember the temple. Right? HAOMER said, I only count the days, because it's anyways a lot of mitzvah, it's anyways just to remember. So says Tosfos, Nira would seem to me, to be Safek HaShecha, if he's not sure if it's dark yet. He's not sure if it's night yet. Yachal levarach, he can still make a blessing and make the bracha. Ve'ein tzarich lahamtin, achi yehei badei laila. He does not have to wait until it's certainly, definitely night. Kivun shu sveika derabanan, because it's a rabbinic doubt. So here's the issue. Remember, I said at the beginning that this whole, the building blocks of the laws of SEFIRAT is to understand the principles of doubt. So here we have already number 1. In Rambam's view, where it's a biblical commandment, you can't perform a biblical commandment on a doubt. You have to know for sure you're obligated. So in Rambam's view, if you're not sure if it's night or day yet, don't make the blessing, because you don't know you don't know yet if this is indeed a mitzvah for you, because maybe it's still daytime. But Tosfos is saying, no, it's a rabbinic commandment, and therefore doubt, we can be lenient on doubt in rabbinic commandments. And therefore, even if you're going to make the bracha early, it's okay. Because it's a rabbinic thing anyway. See? Follow here?
Follow, but Tosfos is saying that since there's a doubt, because there is a doubt,
The doubt as to whether it's day or night, lenient, and allow you to perform the mitzvah. Because it's a rabbinic mitzvah.
The mitzvah of
Counting
the bracha.
Counting the HAOMER and making the bracha.
Now, counting the HAOMER,
Because we're allowed to do the mitzvah itself is rabbinic. So if you're allowed to do the mitzvah, you make the bracha with it too.
seems like we're being machmer on the mitzvah itself to say it, which might be a suffix, which is a suffix, and it's maybe saying it on daytime, but we're machmer on saying the same.
No, it's a leniency. We're allowed.
But lenient on the bracha. We should be lenient on the bracha and not have to make a bracha.
Because here it's it's a good question. It's a very good question. In other words, usually we say that if you're not sure about the thing, don't do it without a bracha, right? So here he's saying the whole mitzvah is derabanan anyway.
If you're not sure, do it without a bracha.
So here he's saying do it with a bracha, because the whole mitzvah itself is derabanan. Because the mitzvah, if the mitzvah is biblical, right? So 1 second. No, sorry. If the mitzvah was biblical, you would do the mitzvah, but you can't do it with a bracha. Because there's doubt.
Biblical.
Since the whole thing's rabbinic, therefore you can do the mitzvah with the bracha, because it's anyways a rabbanon. It's anyways a rabbinic mitzvah. So we're being lenient, allowing you to do it earlier. You're doing it anyway. Do the bracha, because we're allowing you to do it. Us, the sages who gave you this mitzvah, are allowing you to do it earlier in a doubt. So do it with the bracha.
So who says that if you miss it, you can do it the next day?
1 second, we're gonna get there. We'll get there. We'll get to that also.
Does this bring in the Tanai, the famous Tanai?
Not Tosfos. I'm not going to talk about the Tanai yet.
Okay.
I'm not going to talk about it. These are details. But the Tanai is built on all of this. Understand? You have to remember, we're doing reverse engineering. A lot of the information you're sharing.
Building blocks. Exactly.
A lot of the information you're sharing is the conclusions you already know. What you're learning here is the building blocks that got to what you're talking about. Okay. So the next text now. So we already have now one, so to speak, doubt question here is it biblical, is it rabbinic? And if I decide it's rabbinic, then my cases of doubt, I'm lenient. And I can go ahead and make the bracha. I can go ahead and do the mitzvah, make a bracha. As per Tosfos.
Most shuls will not paskin that way, is that correct?
That there are some places where they do it earlier. Not anymore, not nowadays, but it's not uncommon. I wouldn't think it's so uncommon, actually. This is a script. Okay, let's see.
Rashi script.
It's called Rashi script. Okay, so now this is the Ran in Psachim. Ran in the commentary on Psachim says like this. Second to last word. The Roiv Mefarshim Maskimim, most commentaries agree, the Sefiras HAOMER Achshav, that the counting of the HAOMER nowadays, the Leika Hava, the Leik Karban. We have no waving of the HAOMER. We have no Karban at the end on Shavuos. So therefore, Ein El Midrabanan Ba'alma. It's only a rabbinic commandment, Zeichel Mikdash, to remember what used to be in the temple times. Kedamar Meimar Asam, as Meimar put it there in the Gemara in Menachos. He's saying there because he's commentating in Psachim and the Gemara in Menachos, which we learned earlier. Zeichel Mikdash Ba'almahu, the mitzvah of counting HAOMER is just a rabbinic commandment to remember what was, and this is indeed halacha. We treat it today as a rabbinic commandment, not as a biblical commandment. Even though Rambam is of the view that it's a biblical commandment till today. Okay, now let's look at the question of night versus day, and why we don't make a bracha during the day, and why you can keep on counting at the next night, even though you forgot one night, and you go to the next day. Now, actually, before we go to this, I think there's another doubt we should get through first. Let's go to page. Let's go to page 6. 7, I'm sorry. Last page, 7. It's hard to put a proper order because each of these things are interlinked. But let's look at this one first. Mar Rav Yehudai Goin. This is the Baal Lachas Gedolos is speaking. Mar Rav Yehudai Goin. Sir Master Rabbi Yehuda Gaon. Gaon, I mentioned a few times. Gaonim were the period of the leaders of the Jewish people in Babylonia post the temple period, post the Talmudic era. So Rabbi Yehuda Gaon said, Hachi Omar, he would say like this. If he didn't count the HAOMER on the first night, he would not count it any other night. Not he wouldn't make a bracha. He wouldn't count. If you missed the first night, don't count at all. You're wasting your time. My time, what's the reason? The pasuk says you have to have 7 complete weeks. If you miss the first night, your weeks are incomplete. So you can't count anymore. Now, but other nights, if you didn't count that night, be a mama, money be a mama, he counted during the day, Vishapadam may be okay. So what is Yehuda saying? That if I miss the first, I have to have 7 complete weeks. So in order to have 7 complete weeks, I have to have the beginning and end perfectly intact. So on night 1, I must count that night. If I count night 1 in day 1, as opposed to night 1, then it wasn't a complete 7 weeks. It was 7 weeks minus 12 hours. So I have to count night 1 for sure. I also, as we do, we don't take Shavuos in early because you have to have 7 complete weeks. You got to take the day till the end of the day. So you can't start Shavuos early, ending your 7 weeks too early. It's got to be 7 complete weeks. Follow?
Because if you're doing it after Marav, you're the next day over.
But Shavuos we don't count anymore, right? The night before Shavuos is number 49. That's the whole day of Erev Shavuos. If I got Marav early, so I ended my 49th day 3 hours early. No. Shavuos night I don't count anymore, right? Shavuos is the 50th day already.
Yeah.
But if I start Shavuos early, then I cut off my 49th day. So I didn't have complete weeks. So I can't start Shavuos early. And on day 1, I have to count right at the beginning. It's got to be 7 complete weeks. So says Rabbi Yehuda, if I missed the first night, I wouldn't count. The rest of the time, to make sure my 7 weeks are complete, as long as within the 24 hours, I counted. But at the beginning, I have to have it at the beginning. But what's Rabbi Yehuda really saying on the deepest level? That the 7-week counting is 1 unit. It's not 49 different mitzvahs. It's not 7 different mitzvahs, 1 for each week. It's 1 unit. Which means, in Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, if you miss 1 day, what are you counting for? Forget no bracha, no counting. Because the whole point is it's one big singular massive unit. Right? Now the question would be why are you making a bracha on every single night? If that's the case, whatever, we'll leave that alone. But in his view, it's one unit of one single mitzvah that goes for 7 full weeks. If you're missing one day, mitzvah is done. It's not like Hanukkah, where day number 7, nothing to do with day number 6. Right? So she missed 6, you still light 7 candles the next night. Not so with HAOMER in Rabbi Yudai's view. Okay, now let's look at the next text. The same Tosfos we quoted earlier, where Tosfos writes, Oid Pasuk b'Halachas Gedolos. The Halachas Gedolos writes, the book we just quoted, Shem Hifsik Yom Echad, that if you missed one day, the Lo Sofar Shov, the Lo Sofar didn't count, Shov Einoi Sofer, no reason to count any forward. Mishum Deboy to Mimos, because we need 7 complete weeks. The Teimo Gedolahu says Tosfos, this is very curious. The Lo Yitachem, it's not possible. It's not possible for a mitzvah to stretch into a 7-week period in which each day is dependent on the day before. Not possible. Doesn't explain why. Not possible. So the Tosfos and others, they're of the view that each day is an individual day. So according to the second opinion, if I miss day 16, comes day 17, what do I do? What?
2.
Why do I do 2 of them? I missed 16. 16's over. What would I do on day 17? I'd count day 17 with a bracha, because each day is independent mitzvah. So why don't we make a bracha when we skip one day? Why don't we make a bracha? Here's the other doubt. This is the next doubt principle. We have 2 opinions. Is it one long mitzvah, or is it 49 individual mitzvahs? If it's one long mitzvah, no reason to be counting at all if you missed one day. If it's 49 individual mitzvahs, okay, so I missed day 16, but day 17 I still have a mitzvah. So I do make a bracha on day 17 according to this opinion. So when in doubt, what's the principle? If you're in doubt about whether you're fulfilling a mitzvah, you drop the bracha, which means people think that, oh, I missed one day, I'm out of account. You're only out of account according to one opinion. According to the majority opinion, you're not out of account at all, because every single day is independent mitzvah. You just can't make a bracha, because we're not 100% certain that it's independent mitzvahs, because there is the one opinion that says that it's one big unit of one mitzvah that goes 7 weeks, but you still have to count. You still have a mitzvah to count. You just don't do it with a bracha. Following? And what you do is, you listen to someone else make a bracha and you say, Amen. In fact, it's the chazin's real. It's the chazin's job. When the chazan makes a bracha out loud, his job is to have in mind that if there's anybody in the crowd who forgot to do it a different night and can't make the bracha, they can say Amen to my bracha. Okay.
But the counting we have to do on our own.
Yes, you have to do counting on your own. That's right. Because you're not out of account just because you missed one night. You're only out of account according to one minority opinion. The majority opinion is you still have to count as a commandment, because every day is an independent mitzvah. But because we're in doubt, you don't make a bracha. Yeah? Okay, so this is doubt number 2. Doubt 1 was, it's rabbinic, and you're not sure if it's night or day. It's rabbinic, we're lenient count anyway, even though we're not sure if it's night or day. But then there is doubt 2, which is it one long mitzvah, or is it 49 individual mitzvahs? Now, what happens if you throw a doubt into a doubt? Svek sveka. So, I'm not sure if I counted yesterday. So it's 2 doubts here. Number 1, maybe I counted yesterday, maybe I didn't. Number 2, even if I didn't count, maybe the mitzvah anyways is for me today. Maybe I anyways have a mitzvah today. Meaning, number 1, maybe I counted yesterday. Number 2, even if I didn't count yesterday, it's quite possible, like the majority opinion, that the mitzvah still counts for me today anyway. That my mitzvah today is not ruined because I missed yesterday. Number 1, maybe I didn't even miss it yesterday. But even if I didn't miss it, maybe I could continue anyway. It's a double doubt. So what's then?
Say without a bracha.
With the bracha. Yeah, because it's svek sveka. It's such a far doubt. You might as well make a bracha.
I thought we must without a bracha.
No, with the bracha. Where's the Alta? Is it there? Can I pull up the Alta B'Shulchan Aruch? Yeah.
Oh, if you know it, you know it.
Yeah. It's a doubt. It's a sex faker. It's a doubt on a doubt. So we're gonna because of a doubt on a doubt, we're gonna take away your bracha.
I thought it would be a doubt on a doubt. They would say you're allowed to count, and they continue
No, but
the next day with the bracha.
no, it's a doubt on a doubt. It's not a doubt on a doubt that takes you farther away from the mitzvah. It's a doubt on a doubt that brings you closer to the mitzvah. First of all, maybe I did it anyway yesterday. And even if I didn't, maybe the mitzvah still continues anyway. So the doubts are double reason to bring me closer to the mitzvah, not farther away. And therefore go with the bracha.
What if you're sure you didn't do it?
Okay, for sure, then you're only single doubt. Maybe it's one long unit. Maybe it's 49 units. Because it's singled out, we're lenient on the bracha and don't make the bracha. But now I added an extra wrench, which is I may have did it anyway yesterday. Following?
Yeah.
You know, in those days, to gather the whole thing into one big mitzvah was okay for the sages and the chachams and all that, and the tzaddiks.
Well, for the rest of us,
But for the rest of us,
yeah.
especially in this day and age, it's very difficult. I mean, there's so many distractions.
Yeah. So you also have your phone to remind you. You can have an app, Alan. You can have an app that pings you, reminds you to count the HAOMER. I'm serious, it exists.
Yeah, Torah, yeah.
Okay, so that was doubt number 2. Let's get to doubt number 3.
Bud.org has it now.
Sorry.
Bud.org send you a text.
No, there you go.
An hour after, I get one an hour after Shkia as a reminder
That's very good.
that I should have counted tonight being 13.
You didn't pass it on to your friends.
Oh, I thought you wrote the app.
Sorry. Okay, let's go back to page 5 then. So now, let's bring in another doubt, and we're also going to principle of sex fake again. So let's see. There's 2 Mishnahs that seem to be contradictory with respect to the law of the HAOMER, the offering, the waving of the offering. So the first Mishnah is on bottom of page 5. The Mishnah is in Menachos. The Gemara Menachos reads, the mitzvah of the HAOMER is for the barley to come from standing grain. If one did not find standing grain, he could bring from sheaves. It's a mitzvah for it to come from the fresh, moist grain. If one does not find moist grain, he brings dry grain. Its mitzvah is for one to reap the grain at night. But if it was reaped during the day, it is fit. Yeah. So what's the Mishnah say here? Night or day. Best at night, but daytime too. Okay. Now comes the next Mishnah, which is in the Gemara in Megillah, which reads, correspondingly, all the mitzvahs that must be performed at night may be performed anytime during the night. The entire night is valid for reaping the HAOMER of barley on the night following the first day of Passover, for burning the fats of the offerings that has been brought during the preceding day, and for burning the limbs of burnt offerings. This is the principle. Something that it is a mitzvah to perform during the day is valid if performed anytime during the entire day. Something that it is a mitzvah to perform at night is valid if performed anytime during the night. And the Gemara explains what that means is if it's a nighttime mitzvah, it's only nighttime. If it's a daytime mitzvah, it's only day. So whereas the Mishnah Menachos said night best, but also day, the Mishnah Megillah says HAOMER only at night. So now we have a dispute that links into HAOMER counting. So it says now, back to that same Tosfos, which is the very next text on page with me, Berchel.
Yeah.
Middle of page 6.
Yeah.
Tosfos.
Yeah.
Now, ve'echa d'shachach lispa v'layla. A person forgot counting at night. Pasad bal halachas gedolos. The author of the halachas gedolos rules, she'sofer b'yom, you can count during the day. V'chein hayan nira mitoch stam mas nisan d'sayf pirkon. This would seem the implication from the Mishnah mentioned later in our chapter, which is the Mishnah I just read from Menachos. The Tanam where it says, mitzvah b'layla liktzer. The mitzvah is to cut it by night. The niktzer b'yoyim, if it's cut during the day, the HAOMER, kosher, it's kosher. Okay, so in this view, if you miss that night, you can count in the day. what would you be doing when you counted the HAOMER during the day? With a bracha, without a bracha? In this view. No? What would you say? With a bracha.
I do it with a
Yeah. That's what this opinion would say. If the HAOMER could be cut at night and day, so could HAOMER be done during night by day. And if the best is by night, but you did it in the day, fine. You still do the mitzvah to make a bracha. Right?
Right.
Aval bat neder Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam is of the view Iker idach stamba de masnisan, that the primary is the other Mishnah, which is in Perek Sheni, the Megillah, chapter 2 of Megillah, the other Mishnah we read. It's also mentioned in our chapter later, Menachos. Where there the Mishnah says that only the night is kosher for HAOMER. So according to Rabbeinu Tam, if you didn't count at night, what happens during the day? According to Rabbeinu Tam, no counting.
If
you forgot at night, according to Rabbeinu Tam.
Say without a bracha during the day.
It doesn't say that.
No.
Mitzvah's over. Only night.
We're told it's one big mitzvah.
Hey, well, we don't know yet. But for that day's counting, you for sure can't do.
No.
Forget the next day's counting. You forgot during the night.
Yeah.
What do you do that day?
Oh, you can only do it at night, you're saying.
That's right.
Right.
So one opinion says you have 24 hours to count the HAOMER. Another opinion says you'd have 12. So again, what do we do if a person forgot during the night, at night?
We do a bit of each.
We do it by day without a bracha because we're in doubt. We're not sure. Is it a 24-hour mitzvah or 12-hour? If it's a 24-hour mitzvah, you could do it with a bracha. It's 12-hour mitzvah, you missed it. Okay, so make the bracha. Count the HAOMER in the day, but don't make a bracha. And now comes the next night. Why are you continuing with the bracha?
Because you're allowed to. It's at night.
But why you can? Last night you didn't do it, and according to Rabbeinu Tam, you completely missed out on yesterday's counting because daytime counting according to Rabbeinu Tam is useless. So comes next night. But if it's one long unit of a mitzvah, then you lost out.
You lost out, but you were allowed to say it with a bracha. No, you're allowed to say it without a bracha.
What do you mean you're allowed to? Not according to Rabbeinu Tam.
According to Rabbeinu Tam, you're saying only.
Because we're passing combined, doubt on doubt.
Yeah.
It's again the same principle of double doubt. Number one, maybe yesterday's counted because you did it during the day, and according to one opinion, it might count. And number two, even if it doesn't account, there is an opinion that each day is independent anyway.
Yeah.
It's the doubt on doubt. It's the same Svek principle. See, these principles become the undergirds all of the laws of the HAOMER, the doubts and the doubts. Every scenario you have to count how many doubts are there, and then you can figure out what the halacha is going to be. So doubt number one is always going to be: is it one mitzvah or 49 individual mitzvahs? And then break it down. Doubt number two is maybe I did do it yesterday, maybe I didn't do it yesterday. When I did it yesterday, I did it during the day. Maybe it counted, maybe it didn't account. And each of these doubts, you have to ask yourself: does a doubt give me more support that, hey, you probably did it anyway? Or does it say you probably didn't do it? And that will determine whether you continue making a bracha or not. Following?
Yeah.
So if you understand these principles, when you hear the laws of SEFIRAT, it's going to click much better. Okay, so one final thing, which is the way in which we count. So we know we said that you have to count 7 weeks, that the pasuk says clearly. The day, we inferred from the verse, because the verse says 50th day, implying that you've been counting 49 till now. So how do you count these days and weeks together? How do you combine them? So we have 3 different possibilities, and I listed them here. And we do, of course, the possibility that covers all of them. Right? That's how we deal. So possibility 1 is count weeks and days independently. Which would mean like this: weeks only on day 7, 14, and so on. Which would mean like this: you would count here, today's day 1, today's day 2, today's day 3, today's day 4, today's day 5, today's day 6, today's day 7. You wouldn't say today's day 7, you would say today's week 7. Then you would go today's day 8, today's day 9, today's day 10, today's day 11, today's day 12, today's day 13, today's 2 weeks, today's day 15, today's day 16, today's day 17. That's one way. Another way is,
You wouldn't say, oh, you wouldn't say it's 14 days, which is 2 9.
No.
Say 2 weeks.
That's right, days and weeks independently. Option 1. Option 2 is days built on weeks. So today's day 1, today's day 2, day 3, day 4, day 7, and the next week it's 7 weeks, 1 day, 7 weeks, 2 days, 7 weeks, 3 days, 7 days, 4 days, 7 weeks, 5 days, 7 days, 6 days.
7 days.
I'm sorry, it's 1 week, 1 day, 1 week, 2 days, 1 week, 3 days, 1 week, 4 days, 1 week, 5 days, 1 week, 6 days, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 day, 2 weeks, 2 days. Do it like that. And then option 3 is what we do, is all of it, right? We do the days, then we do the weeks, and then we do the day of the week. Each day of the week, we say what day of the week it is too, right? We don't just say, we don't just say the day based on 49, right? And we don't just say the week at the end of the week. We say all combinations, right? The
Say how
count.
many days, and if there's a week involved in those days, we say what week it is involved in those days.
And what number day to that week it is. And what number week, what number day it is, what number week it is, and what number day to that week it is.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we do.
I do it.
Sorry?
I don't know if I'm doing it wrong. But let's say we're on day 8. I look in the sitter.
Yeah.
I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On day 8.
Okay. As opposed to what?
Well, I'm counting them already.
What do you mean? But as long as you haven't said today is day X, if you say that before you make the bracha, then you can't make a bracha anymore because you already did the counting, in theory.
Let's say tonight.
Yeah.
Okay? I didn't do it.
Yeah.
So I'm supposed to do it now.
Yeah.
So it's today's day 13.
That's why I say you shouldn't do that. You should say last night was 12.
Day 12.
That's right.
So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
You say that?
12.
You say 1, 2, 3, 4.
My mind. I'm counting them down. So it's not marked.
It is marked in the Siddur. It's marked.
It's marked in Hebrew.
No, it was on the other side.
Yeah. It's just.
Yeah. Then I have to go there and then
What do I do? I read. This is what do I do?
What I do-
While I do the talk.
Yeah, you read it in advance in English so you know what you're about to read, but don't verbalize it yet, and then verbalize it only after you make the
Say it
bracha.
in your mind with this,
Don't verbalize it until you make the bracha.
and then say it in Hebrew once you understand what it is, and then you can say it in.
But you should know, but to your point, Bachil, we explained this Friday night, that the mitzvah of counting the HAOMER is primarily a mitzvah of the mind than it is a mitzvah of the mouth. The mitzvah is to count. What is counting? Counting is not a verbal exercise. Counting is a cognitive exercise. If I parroted someone else, tell me today's day 13 in Chinese, and I parroted what they were saying, and I had no idea what it meant.
No, but if
Or
understand
one second,
in our
one second,
mind
one
that-
second,
that-
one second.
Yeah.
Did I fulfill the mitzvah if I did that?
What?
If
In
someone,
your mind only?
no, if somebody parroted,
No,
somebody,
if you don't understand what day it is, it doesn't count.
even if you said in the Lashon HaKodesh,
As long as you didn't know the day.
well,
it doesn't count.
listen, no, that's not, I'm making a different point. If I don't know Hebrew, and someone says, repeat after me, hayoim, you know, and then I said, shleisha aser yoim, did I fulfill an obligation? I understand, I didn't.
Because you didn't understand what
That's
you were
right,
saying.
because counting is not a verbal thing, it's a cognitive thing. So, in other words, it's a mitzvah that really begins in the mind. Just like I mentioned this on Shabbos, just like davening. The mitzvah of davening is to communicate to God, to share what you want, to share what you're feeling. So you have to verbalize it. If you don't share what you're feeling, what do? You do mitzvah. You just verbalize, you just mumble. So same thing with the counting of the HAOMER. It's primarily in the mind. Now, mitzvah is to verbalize that thought. So yes, before you say the words of what day the HAOMER is, you should know what day it is. In fact, you should even know before you make the bracha. Before you make the bracha, you should know which day it's going to be.
that's why I never know.
Yeah, in your mind. Yeah, in your mind.
I did this in the sitter.
Yeah, no, but by meaning not verbalized.
No, I don't do it.
Yeah. So don't verbalize the number until you get to make the bracha. Okay. You didn't have a wonderful evening. This gives us a general idea of understanding of the building blocks of SEFIRAT HAOMER.
50 days.
Good to see you, Dennis.
And after I finish it,
Okay, then. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Okay.